All right, good. I see that we're now streaming on YouTube. The recording is on. So it is 7:04 p.m. and I will call this meeting of the Old Saybrook Board of Education to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. So first up on the agenda is audience as citizens. And I do see that we have two attendees that are listening into the meeting. If you want to make a comment, or address the board, you'll need to raise your hand and then we'll promote you to be able to speak. On the agenda is our bylaws in regards to public address. And just, to give a high level overview of that, there's 3 minutes per speaker. If we do have speakers, I'll appoint a timekeeper for that. No boisterous conduct allowed, keep it polite and kind. You must identify yourself by name and address, and you're to refrain from presentations that discuss specific employees of the board or of the Board of Education. So no referring to anybody by name specifically. And additionally, I won't read it off the paper, but generally speaking, when the public comments to the Board of Education, we respond at a later date. Since we don't know what you're going to talk about, we don't have the opportunity to discuss it ahead of time. So generally speaking, either we'll respond at a later time or we can ask the superintendent to respond on our behalf. So with that, anyone interested in addressing the board at this time? We good, Jan?
I don't see any hands raised.
Great, thank you. All right, so moving right into our agenda this evening, we will start with our reports from our Board of Education representatives from the student body. So take it away, Matthew and McKenna.
All right, hi everybody. For this meeting for clubs, we have that the PJs and Prep Link crew, they're planning a virtual meeting for the freshmen, and others can attend as well. For midterm prep, that's going to be on January 11th. Second quarter is going to end on January 14th. We have midterms next week, and there is a virtual college planning night that's going to be on, that was on the 10th. The band's winter concert is also coming up. It's going to be on January 12th. Yeah, that's what we have.
On to our sports report. We've got the boys basketball team. Their record right now is 2-0-0, and they've had pretty notable performances by their junior captains, Ryan Stratton and Aaron Tolve, and then as well as senior captain Riley Lawson. And I'm hoping to get some more information on them next meeting. For the girls basketball, they're 2-3-0 this season, and they're led by my sister, who's also a senior. Her name's Cassie Johnson. And they also have many other great senior players this year, and they're well equipped for the upcoming season. And they also have a lot of freshmen and sophomore players, so they're going to be looking good for the future. For track and field, we had a meet on the 5th, and we had one yesterday. So this is the results from the 5th. The girls won with 100 points with a 22-point lead from second place. We had first and second place performances by Avery Ruckert, Anna Broder, Avery Nozel, Lauren Dobratz, Caitlin Brady, Christina Grace, and an overall team victory. In the 4x2 meter relay, this year's captains are Caitlin Wiley, Anna Broder, Molly Nygaard, Libby Stewart, and Avery Nozel, who are all seniors. And then for the boys, we placed 5th overall in that meet. We had good performances for the 4x2, and we beat Morgan by 0.13 seconds. And placed second in the 4x4. Barthachi placed second in shot put, which is fantastic. This year's captain are Nick Rothman, Robert Johnson, who's my brother, and me. And then we also had a meet yesterday, which was the HK Invitational. And both Old Saybrook teams won first place out of 20 teams. So we had a great performance from everybody yesterday. So that's all.
We may have to change Old Saybrook High School to the Johnson Family High School.
Excellent. That's excellent. So just a reminder before we get into the Q&A to either raise your hand in your window and I'll look for you, or to raise it officially in the Zoom and I will call on you so we don't have anybody step on anybody for comments. So Eileen, I see your hand is up, so go ahead.
Question. So the band winter concert is supposed to be tomorrow evening. Is that going to be live streamed?
I am not.
I
sure.
can speak to that as the band teacher. That concert's there in error. We needed to have it taken off the district calendar and we forgot.
Okay.
Normally we do a concert tomorrow, but because we pushed back our fall concert to December, we're still planning our spring events. We had to reschedule everything because of
Oh, no,
COVID.
that's okay. I was just looking at that because it was on the report.
Yep.
And is the virtual planning night on January 10th that already happened?
Yeah, that was last night.
Right. So how was that? Did McKenna, did you want to?
I went.
McKenna, did you want to report on that a little, or?
I do not. I've been out for quite a few days, so I do not know much about what's going on right now.
Okay. So go ahead, Tara.
It was great. It was great. Good information. We had some good advice to those of us going through the college planning process. And for me, it was certainly, even the second time, it was very helpful. So it was virtual, which was a little bit different than the first time I went through it, but I thought it was very helpful.
And just lastly, what's a PJs and Prep Link crew?
They're the link crew that did the Camp Hazen stuff earlier this year. They're just the ones running the virtual meet.
So I just look at PJs. What's that, pajamas?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, Eileen, if
Oh,
you-
sure. Oh, Sheila, hi.
Excuse me. I think my name was listed as Tara Barrows for a minute. Whew, we're all skipping around.
You're welcome to Sheila.
No, thank you. PJs and Prep is the old name was Cocoa and Cram, and in the current climate of all things anxiety ridden, we had a teacher a few years ago suggest that maybe we wanted to call it something else. Cocoa and Cram was actually the name from the program, and it is an opportunity for freshman students to under normal times, if we could be in person, they would have all come to the cafeteria. And we had some students from Link Crew, our freshman transition leaders, and students from the National Honor Society who would have pre-volunteered to be able to help students get a feel for how to really prep for these bigger types of assessments. They would typically select a subject area, one or more subject areas to kind of make their home base. And then the freshmen would be able to grab some treats that were donated by parents, cocoa that would be provided by OSPS cafeteria services. And then they could sit in groups with the upperclassmen who are there to help them, take a breath and recognize that they're going to be fine. They can do it.
Thank you so much for clarification. I appreciate it.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks. And thanks for your question, Eileen. Any other questions for our student representative? Bless you. All right. Sorry, it takes me a minute to scan everybody to make sure I didn't miss any hands. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, McKenna and Matthew. I appreciate your reports. All right, moving on. Karen, correspondence?
We had one piece of correspondence this week. It was the CABE Liaison newsletter, which highlighted for January this month, highlighted PD policy and advocacy. So I don't know if Jan, can all the board members have that email to them?
I sent it to Trent.
Yeah, we'll scan it and send it
That'd
tomorrow.
be great.
Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, because I sent it to Trent to distribute to, board members.
Okay, thank you. And that's
Thanks,
it for
Emma.
correspondence. Thank you.
Bet. Thank you. All right. So consent agenda. So these are the policies and the minutes from our last minute meeting, along with our special meeting that happened earlier this month. The policies were policies that we discussed earlier. So I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Eileen, seconded Alan, thank you. All in favor, aye, or show of hands?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so moved. And that looked unanimous for the minutes, Pam. Thank you. All right, so moving on to our school start time presentation. And as a
Technical
warm-up,
changes?
excuse me?
It's technical changes.
They were all part of the consent agenda, Eileen.
Oh, I didn't realize it's that entire thing because we did change one.
Was
So-
it not represented properly on the technical changes? Is it not listed?
Correct. It was actually, I didn't realize that was also a consent agenda. We were just looking at the 9,000 series on role of board and members. And so we took a look at that and how that was going to read. So we changed some of the language on that.
So we
Really-
just voted on it, Eileen.
Okay, it's fine. Anybody want any, I'm sorry, if anybody wanted a clarification, please be in touch.
I appreciate it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Eileen.
no, thanks, sorry.
That's okay. So school start time presentation. So this is the first time this is coming to the board. This will be presented by our school start time committee. And I would anticipate we probably will have questions, obviously, and there'll be some follow-up. So this won't be the first time, or this won't be the last time this will come in front of the board. I'm sure there'll be further discussion. In the past when we've had, large issues that people are interested in, we've had multiple meetings and opportunity for people to, share their, from the public to share their questions and concerns and support. So just wanted to make it clear that this was just the first time through. Jan, go ahead.
Yes, if I could just do a brief introduction, first of all, to the committee, the members, many of whom are here tonight, and you can see, you probably recognize a number of the stakeholders. This committee was, tri-chairs were Joe Anastasio, our associate principal at the high school, Brendan Saunders, our athletic director, and Heather McNeil, director of Youth and Family Services. When I asked these three folks to take on this task, I knew I was asking them to take on a big task. And it can be in some communities fraught with lots of concern. And so their approach to this, I think, has been very inclusive, has been very thoughtful about the many different stakeholders that would be involved should the Board of Education at some point decide to make a change in school start time. And they even were, included, our medical director for our school district who's here with us tonight, Dr. Kandoulis, our students, M&J Bus Company, because obviously transportation has a huge role in this. And so I just want to personally thank all of you for working on this since August and for all that you've done and the careful work and research that you've done to bring it to this point. And wherever this goes next, I'm really proud of what you put together. So with that, I'll turn it over to our tri-chairs.
Thank you, Jan. Really appreciate that. I am going to attempt to share my screen and hopefully this works.
We're working on this since August.
Okay. I think Trent would be proud. Here we are. School Start Time Committee. And as Jan mentioned, we have several stakeholders. We have 14 people on the committee. I'm joined tonight, I believe, by our two sophomore students, Carlina Castro and Kelly Walsh, Sarah Fudge from Goodwin, Heather McNeil, Youth and Family Services, Laura Carruthers, who is representing both the high school and the middle school, Nancy Gatta, a parent and a coach, Brendan Saunders, tri-chair, and Nico Kandoulis. Dr. Kandoulis joins us tonight. Did I leave anybody out? Sing out if I did.
So Nancy. Nancy, I think Nancy's here too.
Nancy Gatta, yep, okay. So as you can see, and as Jan mentioned, we incorporated M&J Bus Company as well, because obviously transportation is key. And we've been meeting since August. So what was our driving force here was our students, as always, in Old Saybrook, we're trying to do what's best for our students, and we're trying to promote social, emotional, and physical health. And I'm going to kind of turn things over to Nico and to Heather to speak to the next points here.
Thank you, Joe. I guess I'll start first, Heather. I'm sorry, if that's okay. Thanks for everyone for inviting us. It's been a very interesting couple of months, and we've all learned a lot about this subject. But just to get to sort of the highlights of some of the medical stuff, and I don't want to step on Heather's toes either, but we all know that from our own experiences that chronic sleep loss has really, for all of us, has become the norm. Obviously, this is focused on the students and specifically our adolescents. From the bullet points that you can see, the first one, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC recommends currently a start time for adolescents at 8:30, and also not on the bullet point, but that there also recommends duration of sleep for 8.5 to 9.5 hours per night, both of which are, can be lofty goals for sure. Just a real quick background, the practice of sleep medicine has really become its own specialty over the last 15, 20 years, especially over the last 10 years. There's so much more has been learned about the importance of sleep and sleep disturbances, and how sleep is different for obvious reasons from infancy to adulthood, but especially between sort of childhood and the tween years and adolescence. Obviously, most of us have either lived with adolescents in our houses, or at least we were once adolescents not too long ago, but we know how difficult getting quality sleep and enough sleep is for the adolescents. And there's multiple competing sort of forces, there's a detailed research into the biological forces that happen between childhood into young adulthood into adolescence. Biological forces affecting hormones like melatonin, things that affect the circadian rhythm in our bodies, that sort of cause a shift to staying up later. And then, as we all know, just this socio-cultural sort of things with our students. Social media obviously being a big one, which probably didn't affect many of us a generation ago. Just being social people with significant others and friends, homework, sports, working, all those sort of things are driving forces to sort of have adolescents sleep less than they should be. One sort of myth, just before I get to the next bullet point, and I apologize, but one sort of myth that we all sort of lived with, and probably many of us still do, is that kids, and for us for that matter, can sleep in on the weekends and make up the difference for the hours lost during the week. And our bodies don't sort of bank those sleep hours from the weekends to give us more sleep to help us during the school week. And real disruptive sleep from during the school week to when children are sleeping in on the weekends, that great difference in the amount of sleep really further disrupts that whole circadian rhythm and melatonin secretion. So it can actually sort of backfire in a sense. Just looking at the bullet points on the slide, there is some, sort of strong relationship, sort of substantial body of evidence that shows that there's some real medical benefits with improving sleep, from obesity to specifically type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and some links to strokes and heart attacks later on in life. Along the medical sort of concerns, there's a new sort of terminology used in sleep medicine called drowsy driving. And we know that as we all have our own experiences with drowsy driving, we know that adolescents are even greater risk of motor vehicle accidents. And so there isn't a strong association between better sleep and lower automobile accidents. The risk-taking behavior is common in adolescents with and without sleep, proper sleep. And we know with less sleep, their judgment will be off. So the concern has been, there's been a strong, again, link with increased use of drugs and alcohol and poor decision-making along those lines. It's a little bit less with high school students, but we do know as far as drug use, we do know that college students have frequently over the last 10 to 15 years abused drugs, prescribed drugs like stimulants, medicines that students with ADHD use, like Ritalin, and students use those types of chemicals, including caffeine and things like Red Bull, but specifically stimulants is a big concern now that kids are abusing to counteract their sleepiness later on in the day as they go into night. Academically, I'll just jump over that second bullet point. I'll leave that perhaps for Heather, but just academically, we know that kids are at increased risk for cognitive deficits, executive function, attention, tardiness, and things along those lines with poor sleep. And the third sort of significant portion is the impact on the mental health, which I guess I can leave for Heather just to follow up with.
Thank you, Nico. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And Nico did such a wonderful job of describing the many different levels that can be impacted by even as much as the 15-minute delayed start time. The part that I would speak to is, I think the last slide gives you a lot of links to some of the research that we read and studied putting together this presentation. And one of the things that I was struck by, both by that and also by the informal interviews we did with some of the students we know through the agency, was that they felt not rushing in the morning to get to school was going to significantly lower their anxiety level and their stress level about being prepared and ready for school. And I think some of the data around reduced truancy was really, really significant. So thank you for that. And I'll let you go to the next slide, Joe.
There's some background noise. I don't know if anybody's picking it up, but I don't know if it's a television or, there we go.
Hi, in case you don't know me, I'm Laura Carruthers. I'm one of the band directors here in Old Saybrook, and I teach, like Joe said, at both the high school and the middle school. We always have students at the core of what we do in here in Old Saybrook, I think, from teachers to administrators. But the other kind of guiding piece that helps our decision-making on both a district and a smaller level is our strategic plan. We're starting a new strategic plan. And so we also wanted to make sure that we were tying our decision-making process, both in the macro and the micro, into our strategic plan across all three bullets. So equity is, of course, it's the first goal on our new strategic plan. The improved emotional and physical availability of students in the classroom with a shift in time change is really huge. And it also provides more of a buffer for students who may work or care for younger siblings in that way, which we are seeing more and more of in the community as we have larger families where it is culturally appropriate that the older children help take care of the younger children at night while parents work. So that's a really important equity piece. Of course, with high quality instruction, the teachers are in charge of delivering that, but with a lot of the best research about how to really help students learn and develop independence, it's a lot of the onus is on the students to dive in, think critically and creatively about their work and the subject and content area, and to work collaboratively. And if everyone's awake and better fed and less rushed and less anxious and just feeling better overall, they're better able to think critically and collaborate with one another. And of course, the safe and supportive environment. Social emotional development is always something that we think about, but particularly after the last couple of years, I think this could be really meaningful in helping the students with their social emotional well-being and of course their physical well-being.
So this is our current state with the current start times. And as Dr. Kandoulis pointed out, 8:30 is like the holy grail. If you could get your schools, for your adolescents to 8:30, it'd be wonderful. So currently OSHS 7:30, middle school 8:10, and Goodwin at 8:50. And we went into this with a clean slate. The directive from the superintendent was look at all start times at all schools across the district and see what we could do in terms of looking at logistics, feasibility, what makes sense for Old Saybrook, for all the stakeholder groups. And that's why we have a wide representation as well. So we started digging into that. We started looking into the research. We started we started small with sort of focus groups. We each took a niche in our stakeholder group and talked and listened, and got as much information as we could. And then we brought it back to the meetings for our discussion. And this is sort of where we started to land. Some districts across the country have wrestled with the flip-flop. The little kids are up early, so let's bring them in early, and we'll kind of do a flip-flop of the schedules. So we started thinking about that, but we also ran into some logistic issues as well. The biggest one that came through from some parents was daycare, because if you're going to move the kids earlier in elementary school, you need to be there to greet them off the bus and to get them to daycare. Also, the old bus stop in the darkness. If you go too early with our little kids, they're standing out for buses, and transportation. The reality is that as we shift, if OSHS were to then slide all the way down to the 8:30 slot, it becomes problematic in the afternoon, we were finding, in terms of when we started reaching out. So we kind of moved to the middle school, felt the middle school was kind of the linchpin between Goodwin and the high school. We also had to juggle the shared staff issue as well, and aligning our schedules as much as possible as our enrollment decreases. So all these variables started playing in, and we had, as Nico pointed out, the last few months have been great in terms of discussion, reaching out to other districts, finding out, as much information as we could. And we kept coming back to, where's the most impact going to happen? And the research was pointing to adolescents. And we have a lot of adolescents at the high school. And there seems to be a little bit more wiggle room as we looked further and further into this. So the focus kind of moved away from making a radical change of Goodwin all the way up to, can we slide the high school? And we started looking at transportation. We started looking at how will it impact our kids in the afternoon, sports, things like that. So we needed more information for that. So now that the focus was on the high school, we developed a survey, which Sarah Fudge is going to speak to. 5 questions. Overall, we had 752 responses, really good return in terms of that. We needed information on our businesses that employed our students. So Judy Sullivan worked through the Chamber of Commerce and reached out to the local businesses that employ most of our students. We got information about that as well. As Heather pointed out, at the last slide contains links to the research that we used, a good bulk of it. And we had Guilford recently made a change over the last, I think it was a couple of years ago. We dug into their results and what they did as well. So we kind of brought all this to the table and to find out more information from more of our stakeholders to help us guide us in this decision. And I'm going to turn things over to Sarah to talk about the results of the survey.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fudge. I am a Goodwin teacher, 3rd grade special educator. And I also am shared part-time, or a little bit of my day is spent at the middle school. I got on the committee because I was looking for some leadership opportunities, and I have some great administrators that kind of just pointed me in this direction. And so I'm happy that I always get a little excited that I get to present to you guys. It's fun in some sense that, I get to practice some of my leadership skills. So I appreciate that. So when we came together, and we decided that we wanted to do a survey, we came up, Heather and I came up with 5 questions. And then because I was the creator of the survey, I was able to see the results pretty immediately. So I was like tracking it over the week and watching the results come in, and I wasn't surprised. But when we had met, again, we met every 2 weeks, I had a lot of questions when the data came back. So I will kind of walk through with you that rationale and why I was the one that was responsible for reporting on the data, because I had a lot of questions about it. So we had a total of 749 representative data points. There were some unanswered questions, so they weren't pulled into the total part. So that's why it's 749. But I was really impressed to see how many people did respond to this question or this survey. So you can just go to the next one. Joe, my Vanna. So the first question on the survey is, do you believe Old Saybrook High School would benefit from a later start time, 15 to 30 minutes? This is the total data. So this is everybody that took everybody who took the survey. This is what was represented. So you can see the majority felt yes, that high schoolers would benefit from this. And when I looked at this, I was like, well, I want to know how many parents said yes. I want to know how many teachers said yes. I want to know how many students said yes. So that's kind of how I got the data chair for this one. So you can go to the next one. So this next part, I pulled all the data apart. So this is just the high school. Of students that, or people that have participated that were, like you would say, high school. So 205 were students, 63 staff, and 163 parents. So that's how many people took high school took this part of the survey. So you can go to the next part. So high school students felt yes, that they would benefit from a later start time. I felt like that was more than half. So we were pretty happy to see that. You can go to the next one. This is the part where I, as a teacher, was wondering about how the high school staff would feel about it. And we did talk about this as a committee for a little bit, and this might be a part where I know that Tara had said that we might have to go back and do some more information and more digging and come back to the committee. But out of all the high school teachers that did take this survey, it was pretty split. It was off by one. So I think that this would be a data point to look more into. What are some barriers? What are some things that people need more information about? This obviously was not a landslide of a yes or a no, which I thought was interesting. The parents, you can see 113 said yes and 50 said no. And then this is the high school total again. So yes, this is all the data put together, teachers, staff, and student, that they felt like they would benefit from it. And then I did the other two schools as well, just so you could see, we did pool them. So this was the middle school total. Most of them said yes, that they would benefit from a later start time, and then Goodwin as well. The high schoolers would benefit from a later start time. So I think that was the last one, but I think in all, there was a lot of comments, and Joe kind of summarized some of those comments, like don't fix what's not broken, we're happy with it, or concerned about students being out at the bus stop at early hours and it's dark. But childcare really, when you look through all the comments, like there was hundreds and hundreds of comments, but when you are looking through them and scanning through them you can put it on an Excel sheet. Most of them was like a daycare was an issue, and for the younger age, and then for the older kids was sports and jobs. So after school jobs. So those are some more questions and things that we might need to look into. But I thought it was a good starting point. But me with my data brain, I still had more questions even after breaking apart all those things. I'm like, oh, I wanted to know more about people's responses. But I thought it was a good starting point. So that's it. Thank you.
And that's right.
Okay. Sorry.
I didn't know if I was getting an introduction or not. Sorry.
Brendan Saunders.
Hi, I'm Brendan Saunders. I'm the athletic director for Old Saybrook Public Schools. I'd like to really thank Coach Gatta, Kelly Walsh, and Carly Castro, as well as Michelle from M&J Bus, who were huge factors in all this data, especially Kelly and Carly, who gave us the student perspective. One of them was sure to be at every meeting. I talked to them during the school day, and they were really good resources for us, because obviously this is about the students, and who better to go to than the students. And we got two really good ones on this committee, and I thank them for that. So I'm going to talk briefly about some successes and some possible challenges. Two major successes we had was that M&J Bus worked it out where we could either do a 15 or 30-minute shift, and it wouldn't be too stressful on them to make those changes. We also found that after polling, and this has been discussed already, after polling most businesses in town that employ high school students, having that 15 or 30-minute shift wouldn't have a negative impact on their business or being able to employ students. So those are two successes that we found. Talking about challenges, and this is where the athletic director comes in, pushing school back 30 minutes would not align with the majority of end times for schools in our district. We have schools that end as early as 1:57 in the shoreline and as late as 2:25. So we would be pushing 15 minutes beyond the latest end time now, which could be a challenge when making schedules. Aligning practices with co-ops. We're a small school and our sports teams are unfortunately getting smaller as enrollment declines. So we need to align with our co-op schools, which would also be more difficult if we are at a later time. Obviously, darkness comes into factor as we get into late October, early November. Some other challenges that have also already been discussed are those older children who have to get students off the bus. And then one we had down as a challenge was middle school and high school students have to share a bus, which would be a new concept in Old Saybrook. Although we also know of 5 other schools in the shoreline that already do so. Westbrook schools, buses grades 5 through 12, East Haddam schools, grades 6 through 12, Region 18, which is Lime Old Lyme, 6 through 12, Region 13, which is Coggins, 6 through 12 share a bus, and then Region 4, which is Valley, also has 6th through 12th graders share a bus. So this is one that, while it might be a challenge, we've seen other schools do it and be successful with it before us. So it's definitely something that is definitely doable.
So all that being said, and we just kind of threw a lot at you, we came back to the mantra, what's best for our kids? And the medical and social emotional, research is just stunning in terms of the impact that it can have. And I was even amazed when Dr. Kandula started saying 15 minutes can make a difference. So when we sat back, when we weighed all the information we had based on this first go around, we landed on making a recommendation of shifting the start time at Old Saybrook High School from 7:30 to 8 a.m. We feel that at this moment, that is the most feasible, attainable move that we could make. And it would benefit our kids. Not to say that changes couldn't come after that down the road. Not to say that we can go back and look more deeply into some of the questions that the data, shows us. But initially, from our work from August until now, this is sort of where we landed in terms of a recommendation. And again, we're not looking for a vote. We're not looking for, this is more informational and exploratory in nature. That was our approach as a committee. But weighing everything that we found, we felt that this would be a good recommendation.
And in view of everything that Joe just said, we did, even though this is an exploratory kind of mission that we took on, we do know that there have to be some next steps, but you don't want to just leave it up in the air. So obviously, considering shared staffing is a real logistical concern outside of the busing. We need to make sure that we are making schedules that are feasible for transportation time between buildings, especially in inclement weather, that contracts are being honored, that it doesn't interfere with lunch waves at either school. That's kind of tricky with shared staff, sometimes making sure that kids eat at a time that is reasonable, i.e. not breakfast or lunch at 10:30 in the morning. So that's kind of a logistical piece, and that's certainly something that as a committee we could tackle, or as a small subcommittee could tackle. Larger picture items, parent focus groups are certainly going to be a good idea going forward. There are going to be lots of questions and concerns, and with that, a communication plan going forward. so that we get interest and not panic, I think is maybe a good way to think about it. And all of this is considering, what the last 2 years have been and making sure that everyone knows that we're doing what's best for students and we never kind of stop regardless of what's happening in the world at large.
So again, I would just, as one of the tri-chairs on behalf of Heather and Brendan and myself, just thank the committee for all the work that they did. Very dedicated, giving up the nights and extra time in terms of doing the research and reaching out to people and stakeholders. And I echo what Jan said. I'm proud of the work that this committee has done, especially given, all the demands of this year. It's another unique year, as we say. So question and answer time.
Awesome. And if you don't mind, Joe, could you stop sharing your...
I would be happy to do that. Yes.
Sorry, I can see everybody.
No, that's fine.
And I see that, Alan, you have your hand up, so go ahead.
Thank you, Tara. Thank the committee for their presentation. It's hugely impressive. The approach that you took, the stakeholders that you involved, the research, the approach, the survey. I just can't say enough about that. From my personal perspective, I'm a research data-driven individual at work, and I think that you've presented some really interesting information, certainly on behalf of what's in the best interests of kids. So just want to thank the committee for that. The one piece that stuck out, obviously, was made all of us aware of, was the teachers, the split at the high school in terms of how they were feeling about this. So one of the things I didn't see in the next steps was, or maybe I missed it, how will you address the teachers? And I think Sarah Fudge alluded to it in terms of digging deeper, getting more information. So that's just a question for Joe or any of the tri-chairs in terms of what the next step specifically to address the teachers' issues and how you might mitigate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big piece, Alan. And we kind of went back and forth and kind of tried to dig into their free response. And it sounded like childcare might be part of the issue, because you'd be shifting the day. You wouldn't be, eliminating time from the schedule, which I think Guilford did, actually. I think they ate up some minutes. So they were able to keep their dismissal time a little closer to the rest of the schools. We don't want to do that because we want to stay a comprehensive high school and offer enough minutes and time for our kids. So yes, we will have to dig more deeply into that and find out what the reasoning was behind that.
Joe, thank you for your response. And I just want to add that, you've done due diligence in terms of research with other districts, and further commend you on that, because that's an important factor. As a board, we always want to know what other districts are doing in this regard. So thanking the committee again. Thanks for your response, Joe.
Thanks, Alan. George, I saw your hand up next.
Right. Thanks, Tara. Again, sort of following up on Alan's question, right? So again, I applaud for the data collection, but certainly it's important to understand the reasons why people voted no, right? Because again, what Dr. Condulas has presented, that it's a very compelling reason to do that. And so the reasons for the no has to be driven by something else. And but if you actually also go to the students, or even the students' parents, the high school students and parents, I'm not exactly sure what Goodwin parents, students add to the list. I got to think about that a little bit. But certainly the high school students and parents are the current people. And, while it's certainly a majority, it's not an overwhelming majority. That it's at best a 1/3, 2/3. So there's still 1/3 of the population where there's both parents and or students. It's not the 50-50, but there's still a third that is saying no. And it'd be interesting to understand what some of the reasons are, because I know you guys have listed all the challenges for implementing this, and perhaps by surveying them, you may actually uncover some other reasons that we may have not thought of, or this committee have not thought of, that could be challenges for implementing this. Thanks.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thanks,
Yeah,
George.
if I can just follow up too with that, this is something I didn't include in the data, but I have it right here. So for Goodwin parents, 58 said yes, there's a benefit, and 37 said no, there wouldn't be a benefit to change it. So it's kind of like the same. And then the middle school was 66 said that they would benefit, and 27 said that they wouldn't benefit. And I was able to talk to some high school teachers, and just like at meetings, and did you take the survey? Oh no, I didn't take it. So some didn't take it, because they weren't truly sure what it was about. So I think there's communication needs to be the next step. And if we do more questions, is just a rationale, just wanting to know, because I don't think it was just those 5 questions. There would obviously be the open-ended part to it too, but the data, if you look across the board, is kind of that 1/3 piece that you were just mentioning. So just thought I'd follow up with that.
Thanks, Sarah. Steve, I saw your hand up next. Go ahead.
All right, mine's 2 questions. So if we change the time of the high school start time, do we affect any of the other school start times? And then second question, it's not really more of a question, it's a statement. If we did end up looking at combining some of the middle school, high school, sharing the buses and stuff, we definitely want to identify ways to make parents feel at ease that a senior is going to be with 5th grader, 6th grader. I could definitely see a lot of pushback on that shared bus. But yeah, biggest question is start times to the other 2 schools, specifically Goodwin, because I have a son there.
With the current recommendation, the other start times would not shift at all. By moving the high school and keeping the middle school where it's at, that allows for the combined runs. And to your point about the idea of, a 5th grader with a 12th grader, totally get that. And so we would have to, that'd have to be communication. We'd have to put the public at ease. But to Brendan's point, he pointed out six area districts that have been doing it for years successfully. And the reality too is that not many high school kids ride the bus. Saybrook is unique. I remember my first year here, the number of cars that stream in, it's like the end of the Field of Dreams movie. It's like, and it's just representative of what a tight knit, close community it is. And parents like to drop their kids off in the morning. But that's a very good point you brought up.
Can I also speak to Stephen's question? Because there's something we actually didn't mention in our rationale for 30 minutes. When looking at the 15 versus 30-minute runs that Michelle did, if we only shifted the high school by 15 minutes, the middle schoolers would have to sit on the buses in the middle school parking lot for a little bit. So like that half hour, it's a little bit tighter run, but then their middle schoolers aren't sitting on buses waiting, and the bus drivers aren't supervising that. And to speak to Joe's point, I informally surveyed all of the band students at the high school. It's a very large portion of the high school population. And in our junior senior band, I think there were 5 hands of students who ride the bus. Everybody else either gets dropped off, walks, or drives. So at the most, it seems like the bigger majority is going to be with the younger high school students, which is nice.
Thank you. And thanks for your question. Eileen, I see your hand, but Jan had hers up first.
Oh, sure. No, that's all right. You can go ahead and let Eileen go.
Okay, go ahead, Eileen.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that the concept of early start time is not new for the Old Saybrook Board of Education. This was brought up, I'm going to say, at least 15 years ago or 20 years ago, literally, because there was a study not only by the American, Academy of Pediatrics, but also by the United States Navy. Interesting. And they were also talking about early start times. So the district started to look into it. But as your extensive research showed, there's a lot to consider. And so it didn't really move anywhere. So it is something that was discussed, but not in the comprehensive way that you've all done such a wonderful job. But I agree, it'd be interesting. I have the same questions that Steve had mentioned about the buses, and also if it impacts the other school start times. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Eileen. Did you have a comment, Jan?
Yeah, I wanted to again thank the committee and the board for the excellent questions. And I did not put myself on the committee deliberately because I have a very strong opinion about this. As someone who was a teacher of high school students for many years, I watched kids really struggle with those first period classes. And, you know, having had a child of my own, watched him struggle with those early classes. I think that Dr. Kondulis and Heather McNeil did a really great job of explaining some of the physical and emotional, psychological components of those early starts that just do not match the biological clock and the way a teenager functions. I can speak to that, you know, firsthand experience, both as a parent and a teacher. And so my opinion is that this is an important consideration. And I almost want to ask the board, to consider this a motion, which, you know, will carry on for some time while we gather more information and consider what could possibly come next. And I'm sure you're going to direct us to have more conversations and dig more deeply and ask more survey questions, and perhaps have parent groups, and all those things are appropriate and good, because at the end of the day, no matter how I feel, you know, the community of Old Saybrook has to be able to support this. The preliminary data looks great, looks promising, that 2/3 off the bat, even without the research behind it, necessarily seem to be in support of it. But I just want to encourage us all to, you know, keep moving this ball forward and seeing, you know, where the community lands. And I didn't know if we wanted to invite any of our high school students who are on the committee to give us firsthand personal perspective, what they've experienced themselves or what they hear their peers experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Jan. So, and I know our 2 student representatives are still on as well. So, you know, I definitely would open up to our student representatives to, you know, kind of give the board their thoughts and feedback, you know, on this issue.
I can touch on that. I know even this morning I set my alarm back like 5 different times, and it definitely helps. Like every day that I can do that, it's great, but I can't do that every day. And I think it really makes a difference. I mean, I know I have band first period, which isn't like a huge, like, I need my whole brain for this, but recently I do for some pieces that we're doing. And it definitely helps getting that extra sleep. And yeah, I think Carly has something she wanted to say too on this.
Yeah, go ahead, Carly.
I agree with Kelly. I set my alarm. I have to set my alarm 30 minutes before I actually have to get up because I have to keep snoozing it. And then having band also is a huge help because, again, I think you still use your brain, you just use a different part of your brain. But then on B days, I have English, and that's a real struggle because it's like reading, and reading is kind of relaxing. So it makes me more tired. But I think pushing school back, even just 30 minutes would be helpful because then I only have to set my alarm 15 minutes earlier than 30. So
thank you. And I see McKenna, you've got your hands up, so go ahead.
Yeah, I have a strong opinion on this as well, just like Ms. Peruccio. I've always been a person who's wanted it to start later. I think just like the science is overwhelming, and I definitely am a night owl, and so I do better later at night and then want to sleep for hours and hours during the day. So whenever we do have like delayed starts or any sort of thing where it's sort of like a different view into the life if you woke up later in the day, I'm always overjoyed and like, oh, this is what some adults get to do. They get to wake up at 7 or 8. And I know that's like annoying coming from a teenager, but it's kind of like, especially with 0-hour classes, some of us are there when it's dark and then leave when it's dark sometimes. And that's a little bit too much for my brain sometimes.
Thanks, McKenna. And I see your hand up, Matt. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have this weird like perspective on this because I have a study hall every morning, so I come in at 9 o'clock every day, and it's probably the greatest thing ever because I'm able to come in and I actually can pay attention. So it's really nice. I know we won't be going in at 9, but that's kind of how I have my perspective on it. I think pushing it back would definitely benefit just because of my experience having it. The only thing, and this is a question as well, is where would we put the after school activities, and how would the 0 hours like classes be affected? Because especially if you're sharing buses with the middle school, how would that work, and how would students be able to get there? And where would we put those after school activities? Because that time after school, we would have to start sports immediately. And I know there's supposed to be time between the school ending and then sports, but usually practices always start pretty much right after school because the coaches want to get as much time. So how would that work exactly?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matthew. And I think that's definitely one of the things that, at least that was one of my questions that I was going to ask, and that I'd like to see from a follow-up perspective is, I know when Brendan was talking about the sports and the different end times for the schools that we compete against, that definitely would be something that would be affected. So that was certainly one of my questions to Matthew. And I think from a follow-up perspective, that would be something helpful, when this does come back to the board, to kind of see what this looks like from a schedule perspective, going forward. So Steve, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry to bug everybody again. Just listening to the conversations and thinking some more. Does changing the start time affect any of our current contracts with the teachers, with the sports staff, and the secretaries, or whatever their correct term is? I apologize.
That's a great question, Steve. And that actually was kind of to tie on to that. I had that same kind of question, was from a financial perspective, is that something that we've contemplated yet? Or is this kind of a net neutral change?
Yeah. So in line with the comments made about, the need for significant communication, provided that we're able to kind of get to the bottom of what the staff's concerns, the 50% of the staff at the high school who expressed concerns, get to the bottom of what those concerns are and help and assist with mitigating. There are a number of hours prescribed in the teachers' collective bargaining agreement. But not so much start and end time. So if you're shifting, you would have to shift in a way that kept the number of hours. Secretaries and office, when offices are open, is a mechanism of, management discretion. And we have secretaries who work different hours. Some work, an 8 o'clock start, some work a 7:30 start. And so those can shift accordingly too. Sometimes we shift them to support someone and what's going on in their personal life. And sometimes we shift them based on office needs. So I do think there'd be necessary conversation with those groups. But I don't think there'd be a huge hurdle to jump. And coaches, most of our coaches are folks who work for us already. Some are not. It might become problematic for some of our coaches who are not from our school district and our community. And that would be something that would have to be discussed. Those are individual letters of assignment that would need to be reviewed.
Great. Thanks, Jan.
And I wanted to say that we also asked Mrs. Pendleton to look into the transportation piece. And based on the recommendation that this committee just made, the transportation piece would be pretty much budget neutral.
Excellent. So also I wanted to give Karina a chance to any comments. Karina, I want to thank you on behalf of the board for representing us on the committee and the extra time that you were spending, and just give you an opportunity if you had any comments or thoughts that you wanted to share with the board.
Thanks, Tara. The committee really did a tremendous amount of work and really did some great research. And as people have already said, I think the medical information is very compelling. What was interesting to me is that in the research, we discovered that Connecticut has some of the earliest start times in the nation. And I don't know whether that's because we're, old time farmers that wanted to get going early in the morning. But you can see that even if we do adjust our high school start time, we're still not starting at 8:30, which is the recommended time for, optimal start time for high school students. But I do think that this is an important effort. I appreciate the perspectives of the students because, that's invaluable to us to hear about the impacts, and especially as Matt was saying, where he lives that every day with his study hall and being able to come in late. So, you know, I was just pleased to be able to be part of the committee, and just hope that the board considers the recommendations and we can decide what to do going forward.
Thanks so much, Karina. Other questions or comments from the board? I'm looking to see if I'm missing any hands. Oh, go ahead, Trevor.
I want to thank the committee for all their hard work. I'm a data person, and the data that was presented is very compelling. And I also was really interested in hearing what the students had to say tonight. I think that's a huge part of it. I think everybody spoke tonight as a student, said they would like a later start time. So it wasn't like 50-50, it was 100%. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any more information from students before we can even make a decision. That would be very helpful, at least for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. Great comments. Karen, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know you mentioned that Guilford's already has an adjusted schedule. I wonder if the committee knows if there are any other districts that are looking into this as we are, to see, especially ones that would impact, for example, sports for us. Or are we just sort of a lone wolf right now?
Thanks, Karen.
I think we're a lone wolf right now. I think everybody, probably because of the pandemic, probably put a lot of those initiatives on hold. We weren't able to find another district that was looking into it as seriously as we were looking into it, you know, in terms of a district-wide committee.
Okay.
If I could just add a little bit to that, and I think Ms. Joe is correct. There are some Fairfield County communities that did this work prior to the pandemic and adjusted their times. I don't have the details in front of me right now. And I will tell you that there has been some interest from superintendents around us, knowing that this is something that we were looking into. They're interested to hear how this turns out for us. And you know, what recommendations come from Old Saybrook and what commitments get made by the Old Saybrook Board of Ed in the future. So I think Joe's right. I think that COVID has sort of overtaken some of these initiatives, but I do think people are interested in this.
Great. So Jan, just kind of a follow up on all this. If this was something that we wanted to move forward with, say the research that the board's asked for and kind of the follow-up things that we've discussed tonight, you know, go back to either the committee or a subset of the committee, from a time frame perspective, when would the board need to make a decision, and what calendar year, what, you know, would this impact, depending on, you know, where we are now discussing this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I really think that by March, if we were trying to make a decision for next year, we really would need to, by the end of March, have firmed up our decision. The reason being that it does take a little bit of time for adults to make changes to daycare opportunities for their children, whether those are staff members or families. And so there's that. We would want to work with M&J to make sure that we're optimizing bus runs. Students might need to communicate with employers, part-time employers, and then Brendan, our athletic director, would need to work with, you know, coaches and about school start times, and he have to work with his fellow ADs. It's really interesting when I talk to some of my colleagues in the area and I just talk hypothetically, they say, yeah, well, we'd work with you. And when Brendan talks to the ADs, who are the ones who have to do the work to change the schedules, it's a little bit harder for them to get their heads wrapped around. So all of that legwork would have to be done between March and, you know, the end of the academic year. And if I could just modify your question a little bit, I think that there probably is some additional work, not a lot more, because they've done so much for the committee to do. And I think at some point we probably would want to form a committee at the next level to have more public conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to rush into this without, you know, giving the parents and the public an opportunity to share their thoughts with us as well. You know, it's certainly very impactful. Steve, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I know everyone's probably going to get sick of me tonight.
No, definitely not.
No, so, I mean, March, if we think about it, March is 2 months away. It's not a lot of time. And if we were to make a next level group to start having those conversations with the parents, again, I mean, that's 8 weeks. That's not a lot of time. We're running out of time if we wanted to make this happen. I mean, I've seen the data. I'm all on board with moving forward and trying to get to that point. So the second part of my question is, what is needed between now and March for us to be able to come back in March and make a vote? What kind of, are we looking for more data? Are we looking for input?
Mhm.
You know, what is it that we have questions on?
Mhm. No, I think that's a fair question. I mean, I'll summarize just from what I heard this evening. It sounds like, we need to dig into the data a little bit more to understand the 1/3, it seems like, of certainly the teachers that had a large, although we didn't have a big pool, I think all of the teachers responding, kind of to Sarah's point, I think we definitely need to dig deeper to understand, their concerns about that. I know I had said I'd like to see what the schedule looks like, kind of to Matthew's earlier point. What does that mean from a schedule? What does it really look like? And then, I think, and I don't know if this had already been said or not, but I'd be interested in knowing, like, from if Guilford, for example, went through this change, on the back end, what happened? Is everybody happy? Did they like it? Is this, we made a big deal out of nothing. This is great. We should have done a long time ago. That I definitely personally would like to understand too.
Mhm.
And then, and then Jan, kind of to further Steve's question, if there's further committees that we need to form, and, I think from a scheduling perspective, we'd have to put stuff on the calendar to hear from the public. I would imagine we probably want to do that as a special meeting to, make sure that we give them all their attention. And I see Alan's hand up, so go ahead, Alan.
Just a quick comment to reiterate what you said, and to reinforce what Stephen was asking. Just the lessons learned. We're not the first school district to be addressing this, so I'm sure there's research and feedback about things that went well and things that could have went better. So if that's available, I'm sure we should certainly pursue that if we haven't already.
Right.
I
Thanks.
just want to follow up with Alan and add to that. I often say it in my line of work, let's not reinvent the wheel. There's people out there that have done this. Let's learn from where we can. And again, so is there anything as a board that we are looking for this group to come back with us, at the next, in 2 weeks or whenever? We have the more data on the teachers' concerns, we'd like to see what the schedule looks like, asking what Guilford did. Is there anything else? I'd like to address everything that we can think of tonight, get it back to this committee so that they have this time. I always get frustrated when it's, okay, we'll give you these 3 things. Okay, let's identify 4 other things. Now go back and get these other 4 things. A little brainstorming now, when we might be able to get all of the data to then meet with parents, start having the conversations with parents. And that's where I'm at.
Thanks. And I saw Laura, you had your hand up, and then George.
People on the committee will know this. I love making a punch list as meetings go by. So this is what I have in terms of next steps. I think we need to communicate the rationale behind this potential shift to all stakeholders, certainly the high school faculty, middle school faculty and parents, all that. And maybe we can do that in the guise of a survey that delves deeper into some of that data that we want answers on. We can also make a separate survey or contacts with Guilford and Fairfield to talk about the impacts of their changes, and then scheduling public hearings and maybe subcommittees to address the public on the board end of things. Is that everything?
I'd like to add that what I also heard, Laura, was, and I don't think I heard this, but I really do think we need to share the research with the community prior to any public meetings. And I also think we need to share our survey results with the community so they can see, so they have context for it.
Yeah, I was thinking we could make a big thing after our second round of surveys with, that delves a little deeper in with some of the stakeholders, make a big.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. George, I see your hands up.
Yeah, so the current proposal is to, if this thing passes, is to try and implement this for the fall of 2022, correct?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, and in try addressing what Steve is asking, I think the things that I would like to see, right, are very much more focused questions to the people that would be impacted the most, right? So the current seniors in high school, they're out before this thing happens, and so I mean, their input is great, but the impact on them would be much less. The impact on the current eighth graders would be huge, right? Because for all the they're the first one coming in new. And so I like to see what they're, and of course, the 9th, 10th, 11th graders, and those are ones. And so, and it'd be nice to see something that's better than, 20% participation rate, 30% participation rate, right? So, and again, your question about the communication, it's important that they understand the impact it can have on them, and so their feedback would be critical. So that's the kind of things I want to see, because those are the immediate people that are impacted the most.
Mhm. Right. Thanks, George. All right.
I also want to clarify, I hope I didn't misstate or overstate. When this committee was formed, they weren't told that this would have to be something that was implemented. If they recommended a change, that it would have to be for next year. It's one of the cases where we are dealing with a number of, socio-emotional concerns amongst young people in our country, in our state, in our community, at levels that we haven't seen before, and anything that we can do to alleviate that is, something that I would support, again, if this community can get behind it.
Go ahead, Eileen.
I know that we always talk in terms of the board about social and emotional needs of students. And I think that, not that I'm a sports person, but sports is certainly important to many students who attend Old Saybrook High School. And it's an opportunity for a release and a relaxation that's not necessarily in a building, and fresh air and being outdoors. And I think I would want to hear a little bit more about how that's going to impact some of the competitions that Brendan was mentioning, because students really love their sports. And so that's important. You don't want that to be curtailed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that comes back to the scheduling piece of it, Eileen.
But it's also scheduling for districts, because there's combinations of, right, of other towns that
coordination
might not want to budge.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we can only control our home games. A home team determines what time a game is going to be played at. The majority of fall sports and spring sports are 3:45. 3:45 is going to be very difficult to get to when we're talking about going to HK or North Branford or East Hampton.
There you go.
It's going to make it almost impossible to play some of our out-of-conference games. I know Coach Gatto will tell you, there's no way we could get to Canton on a Tuesday if we don't leave till 3:00. It's going to increase the rate of games that are played on Saturdays. All of our faraway games, we're going to have to move to Saturdays. You're going to see more early dismissals from school, which this year we had quite a few of, because we had many very good sports teams, which made it very far in fall tournaments, which was amazing. But we did see the same kids getting dismissed, twice a week to get to games, at faraway locations. So it is going to be a challenge, and being the only one in our conference, it's going to be even more challenging, knowing that if you play 3:45 at Westbrook, you might play at 4:15 in Saybrook.
And in terms of getting darker, earlier in the season, and how that impacts?
Well, hopefully we'll have some
field lights.
Go to raiseforrams.com.
Yeah.
Right.
We'd love to get those lights up.
Right.
We're making great headway.
And that's home games, but the away games are just as important.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your transparency and honesty, Brendan.
Thanks, Eileen. Great question. So at this point, Jan, and Joe, I think that the board's outlined, I think there are areas that they want to hear, back, from, obviously it would be, if we're going to be able to push this forward, I certainly don't want to take our foot off the gas. From you guys have done a lot of work. I don't want to lose momentum. Kind of to Steve's point, there's no reason to kind of go over and over and over this. At the same token, I don't want to create a false timeline, a rush to get this done in for next school year.
Agree.
So, I would say, I'll leave it, I guess, to you, Jan, to discuss with the committee, what you think is reasonable about when you'll be able to get back to the board with these kind of answers. And, we can talk about a schedule from, going forward. Steve, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
All right. I was just more asking, do we need any kind of motion for something to come back to the committee for us to hold a special meeting, or that's just a conversation we can have at any point?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the procedural question, Steve. So at this point, we wouldn't need a motion. Like I said, we'll leave it to Jan to discuss it with the committee, kind of their time frames, what they think is reasonable. Obviously, I know everybody's got a day job and a night job and a side job, and with all the committees that everybody's on, and just kind of get back to the board, which I can communicate out to the rest of you, what the time frame is going to look like. When we'll see this on as another agenda item for us to discuss further, and potential, dates, to your point, Steve, for a special meeting. But at this point, I don't believe we need any motions from the board. All right. All right, with that, any other comments, Jan or Joe, and we'll move on?
And for me, just thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you again to the committee and to everybody's participation tonight. Really excellent job. The presentation was excellent. And, everybody that joined to present and answer questions, sincerely appreciate it. And the board, great board discussion.
We appreciate the openness and the wonderful feedback. This is one of the most analytical boards I've ever seen, but always the heart is in the right place and thoughtful, and you're just a great team. So we enjoy working with you.
Great.
Real quick too, if I could just say, I know there were 3 of us who were tri-heads. Joe took a big lead on this with communication, with getting so many people involved, with getting so many stakeholders. There were 3, but there was one who did a lot more work than the other 2. No offense, Heather, I hope you don't take that negatively, but Joe was definitely spearheading this project, and
Nice.
Thanks for doing that, taking the lead there.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, excellent. Thank you guys so much. And then Laura, I'm sure that the students didn't mean what they said about the brain power, because I know how hard it is to play clarinet. And
I know what No, I actually know what they understand. It's not the same as asking them to write an analytical essay or take a standardized test. We let them do their big, high stakes thing at night when they're fully awake and have just eaten dinner. So it's fine.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your participation. All right. So moving on to another exciting topic. Alan and Jan, a field light update.
Yeah, this I think feeds nicely into it. Eileen's question about, athletics and games, there are a number of communities around us that have lights, and this town board committee that has formed with Vice Chair Hyla and Selectman Gingrich, honestly, I didn't think this was going to happen, but it is amazing what has happened. And I won't share Alan's news. It's important that he gets to tell how far we have come, or how far the committee has come.
Thanks, Jan, for that. I'm going to follow Brendan's lead with really giving Scott Gingrich the majority of the credit as the co-chair. He's done so much. But I say the committee, and Nancy's here tonight, and certainly Julie and Jan as ex officio members. Did I miss anyone? Nancy's here, and Brendan. Sorry, Brendan's here as well. He's on the Light Up Saybrook committee. So just some quick facts, if you will. It's exciting news, as Jan said. I couldn't be more excited about this. We're at $110,000 as of our last meeting to date that we've raised, but that doesn't include at least 10 to 15,000 that's committed but not yet in the bank, if you will, or it's in the hopper. So we are at 40 bricks sold, and I know we're even a week later, we've sold more. So much to Megan Brady's efforts and all the committee members, and certainly all the folks who bought the bricks. 40 plus bricks is significant. That's raised already $16,000 for this effort to raise 150. We have over 165 donors, including brick and folks who donated money, and it's growing. So that's really great news. We're really close to meeting our goal of 150,000. I'm the committee's confident that we're going to be there in short order. So that's awesome stuff. Great committee that's been working on this. Let's see, by way of some other updates. So we're going to have an event. We haven't termed it, well, we're calling it Fill the Gatorade Jug. But we're going to come up with a kind of a different term, or maybe that's when we'll land. But we're going to have an event on January 22nd at the transfer station from 9 to 12. And we'll be looking, Brendan and Megan Brady will be looking to involve some student athletes, some team captains to be there. But just like it sounds, like the firemen have Fill the Boot, we're going to have Fill the Gatorade Jug. And, you know, Brendan's offered to provide at least 3 or 4 Gatorade jugs, the big orange one. So we should be able to fill that. That's going to be a neat event that, you know, get the word out, continue to get the word out, bring us to that finish line, if you will. So keep that in mind. If you're collecting your transfer station stuff at home, make sure you on the 22nd, you're visiting the dump and dropping a coin or 2 into the Gatorade jug. We'd appreciate that. We continue to staff basketball games to try to get the word out and grab donations there. Scott Gingrich has recently put a, if you will, motivational statement out that I think, Jan, you could confirm, I think that was tweeted and went out on Facebook. Is that right?
Yeah, if it hasn't, it will. You know, we've had some staff absences, and so things have slowed down a little bit, but it's going to happen for sure.
Sure, that's great. So that's appreciate that. And just an additional way to get the word out. You know, we continue to solicit local organizations. We've made a list of who has already donated. Every donor gets a letter of thank you. So we still have plenty of organizations that we're going to solicit in the next several weeks. I think that's about it. I guess I would ask the Board of Ed. So, you know, I'll stick my neck out there, and, you know, I'd love if the Board of Ed would buy a brick on behalf of us as a board. You know, this is a great effort, and I think we're going to land the plane. It's only $28 a piece. I did the math. I had to use a calculator, right? We got 9 board members, $250. That's $28 a board member. So I'm not going to ask you to commit to that now, but certainly, please, if you're interested, send me an email or just send me a check. And, you know, we'll do a brick, and we can come up with a, you know, our names on the brick and such. So
Sure.
Ask folks for that. And I see Karen, you have your hand up. Sorry, I missed you.
That's okay. Just quick question. So at your dump event, can we buy bricks then, or are you just looking for like cash donations? Can we
like a cash donation?
Yeah, so good question. So we'll have flyers to hand out in terms of how you can purchase a brick. And you know, it's actually a flyer that has how you actually write what you want in the on the document. So you could leave it with us, leave a check. You could just throw money into the Gatorade. So yeah, both. We want to sell more bricks and have some cash donations or check donations. Thanks for the question, Karen.
Thanks, Karen. I see Karina's got her hand up too.
Hi there. I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but given the wonderful news about all the funds that have been raised thus far, is it feasible that this will be able to be done for the fall? Do you have a sense for that? I know Julie had said it's such a huge project, but I wondered what the timeline was given the great fundraising that you've had so far.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, I think that's to be discussed further, certainly with Jan and Julie, who's spearheading, you know, the work with Musco. So I don't know that we have a date certain that we can't, but I'm sure Julie will be, you know, we'll be able to revisit that. First things first, let's raise 150,000. Let's do it tomorrow so we can start that effort. But I would defer that question, good question, Karina, to really Julie and Jan in terms of next steps.
If I could just
for a second, I just want to say Nico and Nancy and both of our student representatives, feel free to drop. We will not be offended if you've got other places to go.
May I say the same for our administrators? I think that, you know, the part of the evening that I was hoping they would be here for is the school start time in case there were any building specific questions.
Yeah.
So thank you. I just got interested in the lights, so I'll
stay as
I'll
long as
sign
you
off
want.
after this. And I will buy bricks, so don't worry. I know Scott is very
Thank you.
persuasive, but thank you. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
But so go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt questions and comments. I just
wanted to comment on the project timeline. You know, Julie and I we know what we have on the plate for work to be done in our fields and in our buildings during the spring, summer, and fall. But obviously, as Alan said, the sooner the money is raised, obviously, the more likely it is that we can, you know, hit an earlier deadline. So once the money is raised and we can go ahead and go out and get this project bid out there, it'll come down to, guess what? COVID times, supply, and can we get things to, you know, so those things will begin to play. And then, of course, because you're doing a project outside weather, but I have to say that Julie's already done a lot of legwork, communicating with vendors, including the people, because you'd be impacting for a little bit the turf carpet, you know, the people who put the poles up, the digging. So all of that, all preliminary work that can be done ahead of time is being done.
Thank you, Jan, for that. Very good. Julie, anything you want to add to that?
Not really. I think Jan hit the nail on the head. If we were able to, you know, get started fairly soon, it will come down to when we can get the actual supplies here, and also lining up the this very specific contractors, because this is not, you know, just call your general contractor to come and do this. This is very specific work. So it'll be a matter of getting in the queue to get them in a timely way as well. So, you know, there's a lot of pieces to pull together.
Thanks, Julie, for your comments. That's all I have, Tara.
I mean, you've got a question, go ahead.
Is there a rain date for the 22nd in case?
There isn't. We may do a second date, but no, rain or shine, we're going to be there.
We go to the dump when it's raining, no worries.
Exactly, bring your umbrella and your Lady Rain hat. And have there been any large donations to date?
There have several, actually. We've had $10,000, $20,000 donations. So some matching donations, which has been wonderful. So, you know, people have really stepped up, and, you know, obviously $10,000 and $20,000 is huge. So
yeah, those,
along with just a ton of, you know, everything up, you know, from $10 to $20,000 has been great. So we have, so those, you know, as you know, I've said it before, those folks will certainly be recognized in a different way, the larger donors. We have a gold, silver, and bronze way to recognize them with plaques and bricks and so forth. So more to come on that.
And the balance is 150,000?
That we were trying to raise 150, and we were, you know, at 110 at this point, but I think we're much closer to that even today.
Super. And the whole project is
400, approximately 400,000.
Terrific. Wow. Huge. Wonderful.
Karen, I see your hands up too. No hand. Okay. No, this is working good. I also just want to thank you, all the board members. We're doing good with the hands up and everything tonight. So, George, go ahead.
I mean, I have an optimistic question, right? So let's say you overshoot the 150. Will that decrease? I mean, is the plan to basically use all the money for the lights, so that if you overshoot your goal, then it decreases the amount that the town and the school needs to contribute? Or are you guys planning to just put in the 150 and save the rest for another project? And again, I'm being optimistic, right? You may hit 150 and just stop, and nothing else happens, right? It could be 5,000 short, and so this is moot.
I can confidently say we don't intend to give money back, if you will, to donors. But I do know that there's incidentals that Julie is acutely aware of in terms of other lighting and the bricks, and you know, Julie, I'm missing some things, the shrubbery and so forth. So yeah. Please, Jan or Julie, add to George.
The only thing you really missed is fencing. which has to go along the road. But I think that I think that any buffer we have, given how crazy times are, and dare I say the inflation word, okay, inflation, I think we're not going to have any problem spending it on this project.
Right, there's trenching and there's some electrical work, and there'll be a lot of incidentals. That there's the matting that we have to rent to get the equipment onto the field. I mean, there are other things outside of the project. The project costs that are sort of provided by Musco are around $350, but the incidentals will be outside of that. So any donations we get beyond that, I'm sure will be put to good use.
We call it mission creep at our house, Julie.
Mission creep, it's going to happen.
And the athletic department has plenty of things we can use any slush fund extra money for, so don't worry.
There's never a slush fund, never a slush fund.
Not on this call, Brendan. Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, extra funds. Really,
Brendan, we lost you. Yeah.
All right, I'm going home.
Do we have the ability to edit that section out?
No, it's all good. I know exactly what you meant though. Great. Well, thank you so much, Alan, and to everybody that's been a part of this. I'm so excited, and leave it to Old Saybrook to rally so quickly around such a great thing. So I'm thankful and thrilled.
Well, I just want to add one more comment that Steve or that Brendan mentioned, that this is yet another factor that will mitigate the school start time. It has a potential to, so I just want to put that out there. That'll further support our earlier efforts. So,
exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. No, that's fantastic. Thanks a lot, Alan, and on behalf of the board, and thank you. It was nice to have everybody here tonight talking about such good news. So thank you guys very much. All right, so we're moving on to our first reading for policy, and I'll hand it over to Eileen and Jan.
Perfect. So everybody had the opportunity to take a look at Series 5000, which is a student series on attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism, and the rest are bylaws. So Jan, if you want to review the impact of the chronic absenteeism, one thing that we did talk about as a committee, that this was already looked at from a perspective of some of the inner city schools where students, they wanted to start to track students and for excused absences and unexcused absences. And some students were watching their younger family members, and they wanted a better handle on that because we really know that education is really paramount, and our policy, states the importance of in-school participation. So the regulation is the one that has the change. But maybe Jan wants to mention a little bit about the impact, and I'll talk about very briefly about the regulation language change.
I think that the policy itself, as you can see, is very brief. It's just 2 paragraphs, and really the policy, the changes are just to include 2021 legislation, 3 particular pieces of 2021 legislation. The rest of the changes, the meaningful changes in the regulations.
Yeah. And so as a committee, we have a terrific committee, and we look at things really from a perspective with a fine-tooth comb and how it impacts us here in Old Saybrook. So one of the changes actually talks about or existing language talks about when a student has been absent before the 10th absence, that parents need to be able to submit appropriate documentation, written documentation in accordance with the regulation. And so we had that conversation, and we felt that it needed to be adjusted so that any kind of correspondence with the office at the Old Saybrook High School could be done through phone, writing, or email. So we broadened it out, and Jan helped to construct that language, which the committee agreed to. And that was a part of that regulation that we decided to be more 21st century and not just limit it to a written email. Some people are well known in the community and they could give a call.
There's also a language about remote learning. and guidance for remote learning, which I talked about earlier in the budget and fiscal meeting. That will be coming from the state, and also the mental health days, which are now provided to students 2 mental health days a year in the regulations on page 5.
And the rest, actually, Jane and I spoke that really talk about, construction and posting of your agenda, quorum and meeting procedures, and time, place, and nature of meetings. You had to have a chance to review, unless Jan wants to add any comments to that.
No, some changes in number of days and hours for reporting, but and then, of course, all of these 9,000 series policies consider the use of what we're doing tonight, electronically held meetings, and how to do that in a way that still allows the public to participate and still allows us to function as a Board of Education and Superintendent.
And thank you to, Board of Education for your patience in having the majority of this meeting get into technical changes and consent agendas. We have a lot on our plate.
Yeah, there's a lot of policies out there, Eileen, and I really appreciate you and the committee going through that. I know it's like the spigot got turned on this year with all these updates and changes, and and then the technical changes, are crazy. So thank you guys so much for going through all that. So this is a first reading of these policies. They're posted under the subcommittee, and I think they're in our board notebook. If there's, questions or concerns or anything that you want to discuss, obviously, everybody's available, reach out to, Eileen or Jan or myself. And then these will show up on our next agenda as a consent agenda. So
I just wanted to mention that under the technical changes, when you looked at them, if you have already, those are just changes that don't impact implementation. It's really just a matter of wording, or those that are recommended by Shipman and Goodwin.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eileen. I appreciate it. Any comments or questions? I noticed everybody dropped off the meeting except for the board and Joe, who's a trooper, by the way, and Julie.
I started telling them to go home because I know that they spend all their days dealing with stuff. And
oh, I'm joking.
Joe, go home.
I was just contact tracing the board. So
thanks, Joe.
Check your voicemails. Right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Joe. Awesome. Well, thank you, Eileen and Jan, for going through those with us. So just some reminders, next budget and fiscal meeting, January 18th, still at 6 o'clock, George?
It is. And I mean, initially when that was listed, that was going to be like if needed, but based on the discussion today and the shortness of today's meeting and the questions, it definitely will happen. But I think we just left it between, 6 o'clock is fine because there is no Board of Ed meeting after that. So 6 o'clock should be fine.
There is a Board of Finance meeting though at 7, and I know that Julie and I did
okay, sure. Yeah, but in that case, are you going in person or online?
I can't hear you, Pam. What'd you say, Pam?
She said something about 6:30.
Yeah, they've started their meetings earlier, starting in January.
Okay. All right. So do you want to start, Georgia, at 5:30 then? Is that convenient for you and the budget and fiscal team, Julie?
It works for me. I mean, I think the impact more is going to be more on Jan, Julie, and Pam, right? So, and the rest of the committees. So just let me know if that works for other people.
Yeah.
That works for me.
That's fine.
How about you, Julie? Is that okay? Okay. All right. So why don't we plan on that, George, moving to 5:30 on the 18th?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And then Public Relations Committee meeting. I know it's Trent and I's favorite committee on January 25th at 5 o'clock. And our next Board of Education meeting, January 25th at 7. And I anticipate that'll be an online meeting like tonight's meeting. So with that, unless there's questions about the reminders, Alan?
Just a quick question. Yeah, the budget books are available still. Trent has them, is that right?
It's sitting,
Okay.
yours is right on Trent's desk. And if you want to give us a call tomorrow, Michelle can have it ready for you to pick up, or we can get it to you if you need us to.
Thanks, Jan. I'll come Thursday morning.
Great.
All right, thank you.
And Steve, you have a question?
No, I was just gonna make a motion.
I love it. Would you like to make a motion to adjourn? Steve, I would love that.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you can. Second, anybody second that motion? Up. I got Karen first. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, it was unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Great meeting. Jan, excellent technical and thank
You
you.
did well, Jan.
Thank you.
It's not over yet. Thanks, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.